They thought I wouldn't feel the shove. At my age, people assume your body softens before your senses do, like everything fades quietly, politely. But I felt every finger pressed into my back. I felt the wheelchair jolt, the dock tremble, the exact moment someone decided my life was no longer inconvenient enough to keep. Just a little closer, a voice whispered. Not to me. About me. Then the push came. Not rushed. Not panicked. Certain. The sky above the lake was still beautiful when it happened. That was the cruelest part. Evening light spilled across the water like forgiveness. Dragonflies skimmed the surface, careless and alive. The lake looked peaceful, so peaceful it could convince anyone that nothing bad ever happened there. The wheelchair tipped. Wood vanished. Cold rose up to meet me. Water swallowed my body in one violent breath. It punched the air from my lungs, flooded my ears, wrapped around my chest like hands that didn't care whether I fought back. My mouth opened on instinct, and the lake rushed in, thick and bitter. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I sank. For one long second I believed them. I believed this was the end, quiet, unseen, swallowed by something deeper than memory. My body thrashed, but the water was heavier, stronger, older than me. Then I heard voices. Above the surface. Calm. Close. She went down fast. Another voice answered, steady, almost relieved. Good. No one saw. No one said my name. That hurt more than the water in my lungs. I let myself sink just a moment longer, not because I was giving up, but because I was listening. Listening to footsteps retreating. Listening to people walk away from me like I was already a finished story. She drowned, someone said. Now it's done. Done. My chest burned. My vision dimmed. But something stubborn. Something that had survived decades of being overlooked, spoken over and quietly used, refused to let go. The lake didn't know who I was. It didn't know my age. Didn't know my pain. And it didn't know how long I'd been underestimated. My body remembered water. I twisted sideways, fighting the drag of soaked fabric, the weight pulling me down. My arms screamed. My legs barely answered. Each movement felt slow, like swimming through every mistake I'd ever forgiven. My fingers scraped against wood. Rough. Slimy. Real. I clung to it beneath the dock, chest pressed tight against the beams, hidden in shadow while the voices above faded into distance. Shoes on wood. No running. No hesitation. Just people leaving, confident the lake would do their work for them. The water rocked gently, as if nothing violent had happened at all. When I finally dragged myself toward the shore, coughing and shaking, the world looked exactly the same as before. Peaceful. Ordinary. Unbothered. That terrified me. Because whatever happened on that dock wasn't an accident. And whoever walked away believed I would never speak again. They thought the water had taken me. They were wrong. I was still breathing. Still thinking. Still here. And if they believed I was already dead, then they would show me exactly who they really were next. What do people do when they're certain the one person who knows the truth can no longer speak? I didn't rush home. People expect panic after something like that. Sirens. Shaking hands. A phone pressed to the ear begging someone, anyone, to come save you. But panic wastes energy, and I had already spent too much of myself fighting the lake. So I moved slowly. Every step away from the shore felt unreal. Like I was walking through a life that wasn't mine anymore. Water dripped from my clothes onto the dirt path. Each drop a quiet reminder that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The sun was sinking behind the trees, staining the sky in tired colors. Evening birds called out to one another, unaware that a woman who should have been dead was limping past them, heart still hammering, breath still burning. No one stopped me. No one noticed. That's when it hit me, how easy it would have been for me to disappear. One push, one lie, and the world would have kept turning without so much as a pause. By the time I reached my front porch, my body was shaking harder, not from fear, but from the cold settling deep into my bones. I must have looked like something the lake spat back out and forgot about. Hair plastered to my skull. Dress heavy with water. Shoes squelching with every step. I unlocked the door. The house greeted me with silence. Not concern. Not urgency. Just quiet. No lights on. No voices calling my name. No sign that anyone had rushed here in worry or guilt. The air smelled the same as always, old wood, tea leaves, dust warmed by habit. The clock in the hallway ticked steadily, indifferent to the fact that its owner had nearly died. I sat down on the bench by the door and peeled off my soaked sweater. My hands trembled now, finally allowing themselves to feel. I wasn't scared. I was clear. I changed into dry clothes slowly, deliberately, like I was anchoring myself to the world one small motion at a time. Folded the wet ones neatly. Not because they mattered, but because I did. In the kitchen, I put the kettle on. Old habits don't vanish just because betrayal shows its face. While the water heated, headlights swept briefly past the window. A familiar car. It slowed, then kept going. They weren't checking on me. They were checking for police. For lights. For consequences. I wrapped my hands around the mug when the kettle clicked off, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. They believed the lake had finished me. That belief was dangerous, but it was also a gift. Because people reveal the most when they think no one is left to contradict them. I didn't call anyone that night. Not the police. Not a neighbor. Not family. I sat in the living room, staring at the walls that had witnessed years of quiet compromises. My husband's photo watched from the mantel, his smile frozen in a time when trust still felt safe. "You'd know what to do," I whispered. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel helpless for needing an answer. I felt patient. They thought I was gone. And that meant tomorrow they would start acting like it. If the world already thinks you're dead, how long can the people who tried to erase you keep pretending they're innocent? I didn't sleep. Not the kind of sleep people mean when they close their eyes and drift. I lay still, staring at the thin crack in the ceiling, the one my husband used to promise he'd fix next weekend. He never did. After he died, I never asked anyone else to. Some things stay broken because they remind you who once cared enough to notice. The house felt heavier at night. Silence usually comforts me. I've lived long enough to appreciate quiet. But that night, silence pressed against my chest, dense and watchful, like it was waiting to see what I would do next. Every time I closed my eyes, the water returned. The shove, the tilt, the certainty in their hands. What haunted me most wasn't the cold. It was how calm they sounded afterward. No panic. No second thoughts. Just plans already moving forward without me. Around 4 in the morning, when darkness turns thin and blue, I sat up. My joints protested, but pain felt honest. Fear had already spent itself. I turned on the lamp. Warm light spilled across the room, catching dust in the air, settling on framed photographs lined neatly along the wall. My daughter at 12, smiling wide and careless. My nephew at 9, leaning against me like I was something solid. My husband, sunburned and proud, holding a fishing rod like life had been generous. They all looked innocent there. Before money. Before entitlement. Before silence became a weapon. I shuffled into the kitchen, wrapped in my old robe, and set the kettle on again. The sound of it heating grounded me. Small sounds matter when you're alone. They remind you you're still here. While it warmed, I pulled out my address book. The old one with frayed corners and handwritten numbers. My husband's handwriting still lived there, heavy and deliberate, like he carved his words into the paper so they couldn't disappear. That's when I noticed it. Mail stacked where it didn't belong. Bills I didn't recognize. Insurance notices mentioning cognitive decline I had never been tested for. Bank letters I had never opened. Someone had been handling my life without my consent, and doing it confidently. Grant's confidence. He'd always spoken smoothly, like he was doing me a favor by taking control. My daughter used to call it ambition. I used to call it helpful. Now I saw it for what it was. The kettle clicked off. I made tea and sat at the table, spreading the papers out like a confession written in someone else's handwriting. Transfers. Authorizations. Decisions made for me, not with me. They hadn't just tried to kill me last night. They'd been quietly erasing me for years. By morning light, my hands had stopped shaking. Outside, birds moved through the trees like nothing had changed. A woman who was supposed to be dead stood at her kitchen table, reading the proof of her own disappearance. I folded the papers carefully and slid them into a folder. If they thought I was gone, they would keep moving freely. Carelessly. Greed always gets sloppy when it thinks it's won. And I intended to let them believe that lie just a little longer. If someone has already started spending your life like it belongs to them, what happens when you finally stop being silent? By late morning, my body felt steadier. Not strong steady. At my age there's a difference. Strength is for lifting. Steadiness is for surviving. I dressed carefully, choosing plain clothes, the brown coat my husband bought me on our last anniversary. It still smelled faintly of cedar like safety. I stood in front of the hallway mirror longer than usual. The woman looking back at me had gray hair and tired eyes, yes, but there was something else there now. A sharpness. A line drawn where softness used to live. Whatever kindness I once carried like loose change in my pockets had settled into something deliberate. I locked the door and drove to the bank. The building was small, ordinary, the kind of place people overlook. I always liked that about it. The tellers knew my name long before anyone knew my net worth. That mattered to me. Inside, the lights were too bright. A young man smiled politely and asked if I had an appointment. I need to review my accounts, I said. All of them. He blinked, then nodded and led me to a glass-walled office. The financial manager, mid-40s, professional, careful, greeted me with that gentle tone people reserve for women they think are fragile. As the records came up on the screen, her fingers slowed, then stopped. Mrs. Caldwell, she said carefully, are you aware of these transactions? The screen filled with lines of movement. Monthly transfers to unfamiliar accounts. Subscriptions I'd never used. Insurance premiums far higher than necessary. Authorizations I didn't remember giving. I didn't lean forward. I didn't gasp. Yes, I said. I am now. She hesitated. Some of these were set up through a power of attorney. I know exactly what it gives him, I replied. Silence stretched. I want it revoked, I said. Effective immediately. Her eyes searched my face, looking for confusion, doubt, weakness. She didn't find any. She nodded and began printing paperwork. As I signed each page, something strange happened. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt returned to myself. When I left the bank, the sun was warm on the pavement. People passed me without a glance, unaware that a woman they thought was fading had just taken her life back with a pen. When I got home, gravel crunched outside. I looked through the window. Milo, my nephew. He stood on the porch too long before knocking, checking the street, the driveway, like someone arriving to take something he didn't want to ask for out loud. When I opened the door, his face drained of color. Aunt, I thought you. Yes, I said calmly. You thought wrong. He swallowed hard. I just needed to talk. About the loan. Of course he did. I can't help you anymore, I said gently. His jaw tightened. Grant said. I don't care what Grant said. For a moment, anger flickered behind his eyes. Then fear. Then resignation. You're making a mistake, he muttered. I made them already, I replied. This isn't one of them. He left without looking back. I closed the door slowly. They had come to collect what they thought was theirs. They didn't know yet that the ground beneath them was already shifting. Rehook. Cutting them off made them nervous. What would happen when they realized I also had proof? The next morning, I woke with a thought already sitting upright in my mind. The camera. They'd mentioned it without realizing they had. A careless word tossed out in confidence. Camera won't see anything. People only say things like that when they believe the world bends around them. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting my body wake without complaint. The air had turned sharp overnight, the kind of cold that slips into your bones and stays there, reminding you of every year you've lived. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, drank my tea, and locked the door behind me. The drive to the marina was quiet. No radio. No music. Just the sound of tires on pavement and my own breathing. Places hold memory whether they want to or not. As I pulled into the gravel lot, my hands tightened on the wheel. Not in fear but recognition. This was where they decided I was finished. Inside the marina office, a young man sat behind the counter, boots hooked around the legs of his chair, coffee steaming beside him. He straightened when he saw me. Morning, ma'am. Can I help you? Yes, I said. I need footage from last night. Doc 3. He hesitated. Security footage is restricted unless there's an incident. There was, I replied. A serious one. That earned me a longer look. He disappeared into the back and returned with the manager, a woman about my age, weathered, steady, the kind of person who's seen enough water to respect it. You want to tell me why you need it? She asked. Because someone tried to kill me, I said. She didn't flinch. Come with me. The room behind her was dim, lined with monitors showing empty docks, rippling water, boats rocking gently like nothing bad ever happened anywhere. She pulled up Dock 3 and paused. You sure you want to see this? I'm sure. The footage played. There I was. Small. Still. Waiting. Behind me, figures I knew by heart. One hand on the wheelchair. One glance over a shoulder. One person standing far enough away to pretend innocence. I watched myself disappear into the water without sound. The manager exhaled slowly. Damn. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I had already lived this moment. Seeing it again didn't hurt, it clarified. I'll need a copy, I said. She nodded, transferring the file onto a flash drive. When she handed it to me, her fingers lingered for just a second. You going to the police? In time. She studied my face, then nodded with something like respect. If you need anything, you come back. The flash drive felt small in my coat pocket. Too small to hold the weight it carried. Truth often is. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car, engine off, watching sunlight ripple across the lake. Water doesn't lie. It shows you exactly what you are if you pay attention. They thought the lake erased me. They didn't know it had kept a record. If a single piece of evidence could unravel everything they built, who would panic first when they realized it existed? I didn't go to the police first. Justice rushed is justice ruined. That's what my husband used to say. He believed in timing the way fishermen believe in tides. Pull too early and the line snaps. Wait and the weight comes up clean. So I drove to the one person who had never confused kindness with weakness. Daniel Reeves. His office sat above an old hardware store, the same place it had been for decades. Peeling paint on the railing. Wooden steps worn smooth by time and indecision. When I pushed the door open, he looked up from his desk and frowned, then stood so fast his chair rolled back. My God, he said softly. You look like you walked out of a storm. I did, I replied. I placed the flash drive on his desk. He didn't touch it right away. Smart men know when something small carries the power to end lives. Tell me, he said. So I did. Slowly. Carefully. No drama. Just facts stitched together with breath and memory. The shove. The water. The voices. The calm way they walked away. When I finished, he leaned back and closed his eyes. Your family, he said. Not as a question. Yes. He exhaled long and heavy. We'll lock everything down. Trusts. Protections. New power of attorney. Someone neutral. My granddaughter, I said. Lillian. He nodded. Good choice. When he placed the flash drive in his safe and turned the key, something inside me settled. Not relief, relief is soft. This was solidity. Ground beneath my feet. They'll come, Daniel warned. They'll try to scare you. Discredit you. I know, I said. Let them. They didn't wait long. The next afternoon, Grant's car roared up my driveway like anger on wheels. I opened the door before he knocked. He smelled like panic masked with confidence. Where have you been? He snapped. Accounts are frozen. Yes. You can't do this. I already have. He paced, voice rising, throwing words like ropes. Confused, paranoid, scared, unwell. The same language men use when women stop cooperating. I waited until he ran out of air. You tried to kill me, I said. The room went still. You don't have proof, he whispered. I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. Just knowingly. The Marina camera does. His face drained of color. He left without another word. The police came the next morning, not with sirens but with quiet certainty. When I handed them the flash drive, the older officer nodded once. You did the right thing, he said. I didn't say anything. I was done explaining myself. If the truth was finally moving with badges, files, and consequences, what would happen to the one person who watched in silence and did nothing? The arrests didn't come with noise. No flashing lights. No shouting. No neighbors gathering at windows like it was a show. Just quiet cars, quiet cuffs, and quiet men who finally understood the weight of their own choices. Grant was taken first. I watched from my living room window as he stood in my yard, hands behind his back, head lowered. He didn't look toward the house, not once. Shame does that. It forces people to stare at the ground they once believed they owned. Milo followed later that day. I didn't see it myself, but Daniel called. He ran, Daniel said. Not far. Running had always been his instinct. Standing still requires honesty. My daughter came that evening. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. Like fear had slowly folded her inward over the years until there wasn't much left to stand on. They showed me the video, she whispered. I nodded. I didn't think he'd do it, she said. I thought it was just pressure. I thought scaring you would make things easier. You watched, I said gently. That mattered. She cried then, not loudly, not dramatically. Just the quiet kind of crying that comes when excuses finally run out. I don't hate you, I told her. But I won't pretend this didn't happen. That was the hardest truth for her to accept. Some wounds don't bleed. They separate. The days that followed were calmer than I expected. Papers were signed. Accounts secured. My granddaughter came over with soup and steady hands and no questions that weren't rooted in care. And then I made one last decision. I left. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. I bought a small cottage near the coast, nothing fancy. Peeling paint. Floors that creaked like they were telling old stories. A place with no memories waiting to hurt me. On my first evening there, I took my tea down to the beach. The ocean moved in long, patient breaths. Honest water. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't conspire. It doesn't whisper lies behind your back. I sat there until the sky dimmed and the wind cooled my skin. The lake tried to take me. The people I trusted nearly helped it. But I walked out of that water with more than breath. I walked out with my life intact, reclaimed, and finally my own. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. You are allowed to choose yourself. No matter how late. No matter who disapproves. Don't wait for someone to push you into deep water before you remember your worth. If this story moved you, please like the video so it reaches more people who need to hear it. Subscribe for more true, powerful stories like this. And share it with someone who might be standing closer to the edge than you realize. Sometimes survival begins with a single truth being heard.